This week, we have institutional investment directly into HBAR. Macro conditions are pointing to a potential crypto bull run in the year to come. Hedera continues to emerge as a serious leader in the crypto industry. We have a Hedera-enabled spinoff coming out of one of the Hedera governing council members, an awesome Shark Bites episode, Karate Combat blew the doors off at Karate Combat 49, and much more. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, still coming to you every week to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So the first thing that we're going to get into is that institutional investment by Emerge. So Emerge describes itself as a pioneering institutional asset manager focused exclusively on AI and Web3 tech. And I did check, and it's a verified organization on X. They cite Hedera's speed, low fees, emerging use cases, ABFT security, and governance as reasons for investing. Now, we have seen sovereign wealth funds from Qatar and Saudi Arabia investing in the Hedera ecosystem, but it was good to see this investment directly into HBAR because I think HBAR's success is absolutely critical to Hedera's success. The next thing that I want to touch on is Hedera just generally leading in the space. First of all, we have DeRec and entities like Cardano and Constellation, Ripple, and Algorand following Lehman and Hedera's lead in addressing that serious issue in Web3. But this week we got some additional announcements showing that Hedera is continuing to lead across the crypto space. We're going to start off with an announcement that came out of MiCa. Now, if you just glance over this announcement, it says Hedera joins the Ripple and Aptos foundations in the MiCa Crypto Alliance. But it does mention that the MiCa Alliance was formed by the DLT Science Foundation. And we know that the DLT Science Foundation was seeded with capital from Hedera. Now, this alliance is focusing on helping crypto firms meet the new European regulations. And we know how challenging that's been for crypto service providers in that region. The next area that I want to highlight Hedera's leadership might be a little bit surprising, and that's in the open source arena. The reason why that might be surprising is the underlying algorithm for Hedera Hashgraph was initially patented to prevent forking of the Hedera network. Now, of course, that became open source a couple years later, but now we're taking a really big step forward in the establishment of something called Hiero, and nobody can explain it better than Lehman himself, so I'm going to let him take it.
It is great to be here today. So we have the Linux Foundation, and within that there's LFDT, Linux Foundation Distributed Trust, Decentralized Trust, and then within that there is Hiero. The Hiero project is the contribution from Hedera of all of the code. So this is the first time that a public blockchain DLT has taken all of its code, its open source code, and put it in an independent organization. So of course we have representatives on it. Hedera has joined LFDT, but it's independent. We don't control it. You can get involved. You can become a contributor and then a maintainer, and then you can become part of the leadership and you can help run it. This is independent. This is a big deal. We are the first public blockchain or DLT to do this. I don't think we're the last. I think everyone should be doing this. And everything has been contributed. So it is the code for the mainnet validator nodes. It's the code for the mirror nodes that watch it and remember it. It's the code for the explorers that allow you to go back and see the whole history and do queries on it. It's the code for SDKs that help you to build on top of it. It's the code for all sorts of other tools. And this is just the beginning. This is what Hiero has right now. But if you are, for example, building a wallet in the ecosystem, you could have your wallet project be a project under Hiero. We are happy to have you bring your open source project and make it part of Hiero. And we can bring everyone together to work on this together. So this is what Hiero is. Today is actually the 5th anniversary. Today is the 5th anniversary of open access. This is when Hedera first became accessible to the world. So the network had been running with just a test group using it, and it was 5 years ago today that Hedera opened up to the world. And now today, 5 years later, is the first time that any public blockchain or DLT has contributed all of its open source code to this independent organization, And so today we are happy to celebrate our 5th anniversary with this major milestone. Hiero, as in hieroglyphics. The logo for it is actually the hieroglyphic for the letter H. in ancient Egyptian. And you can see there a picture of an actual ancient Egyptian carved wall that has the Hiero logo in it. And that is the hieroglyphic for the letter H. We are very excited to get you involved. So there are many ways that you can become involved. If you are a developer, if you are into open source, but maybe this blockchain, Web3, cryptocurrency, and NFTs and smart contracts, maybe that is a world that you haven't yet dug into. This is the perfect bridge for you. This is the perfect way for you to get involved in this new world of Web3, if you're deeply into Web2. If this is all new to you, this is the way to get involved. Because it's under the Linux Foundation, under LFDT, you can trust it. We are going to be spending a lot of effort on making this accessible for you so that it's easy for you to get involved. So how can you do that? Well, you can go to the lfdecentralizedtrust.org website. That's the LFDT website. And the LFDT website has all of the projects in LFDT, including Hiero. Or you can just go to hiero.org, and you can see all of the projects that will become part of Hiero, starting with all of this code that was contributed that I mentioned. But it will grow over time. And so from there, you can go to all of the GitHub repos. There's a lot of repos. And it's over 100 repos, I think. It's a huge number of repos. And you can get involved in those. You can see what's there. You can download it. You can play with it. You can start to contribute it. You can write issues for it. You can start to do commits and fix bugs, add features. You can discuss the commits and PRs from other people. You can discuss the issues online. You can even create PRs. And as you contribute, you can become a maintainer. You can become part of the core group that is actually building this ecosystem. And then you can even be part of the leadership. So I said we have representation on it, but over time, you become the leadership of Hiero. And that's the way it should be. I'm excited to be part of Hiero, and I don't control it. And I'm excited to have you become part of Hiero and be involved in building it up. And then, of course, if you're already a Web3 veteran, if you're already a native of this ecosystem and you're already building on Hedera, you can now switch over to this Hiero ecosystem. And in fact, you can get your project, if you would like, to become part of Hiero. Hiero is an umbrella for all the projects. Why not join Hiero? And then your project will be part of the advertising of Hiero, and you'll be part of the ecosystem of people that are developing Hiero. So there are many different ways you can get involved. I think this is the future. This is the future of Hedera. We're betting everything on this. But I think this is the future of blockchain. This is the future of DLT. This is the way the world needs to go. You need to have open source software. That's a good foundation. But then you also need independent, open governance of it. And that's also important, of this code base. And so I think that we're blazing the way here in a way that other people will also be following. And this is important. So I would encourage you to get involved in that. I would encourage you to give us your feedback on where you would like it to be going and how you would like it to be evolving over time. And let me know what we can do for you. Let me know your feedback and how we can help you. Let me know how we can make it easier for you. I hope you'll come by our booth. I hope you'll come by our panel. I hope that you will come and talk to me if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like to do. And I just thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Now, we are going to dig a little bit more into Hiero a little bit later in the show, but if you want to do a really deep dive, I suggest you go check out Brandon D's interview with Richard Baer. They do a really deep dive, and they get into all the details. Now, just over a year ago, we had the establishment of the Stablecoin Studio, and Hedera announced an additional studio that's going to be launching called the Asset Tokenization Studio. The studio is an end-to-end toolkit for the configuration, issuance, and management of tokenized bonds, equities, and other traditional financial assets on the Hedera network. This initiative is led by Hedera ecosystem partners IO Builders, the Hashgraph Association, Red Swan, and the HBAR Foundation. The studio enables institutions and developers to securely manage entire asset life cycles on Graph. From the initial ownership of the assets, compliance components like KYC and whitelisting, documents handling, and notifications. Hedera said that the Asset Tokenization Studio leverages Hedera's unique network features to address compliance, security, and regulatory requirements needed by users. So Hedera continues to build these tools that I think are going to pay some serious dividends in the long run. Now all we have to do is get spending under control, which I think is well underway, and we're going to be on a really solid path forward. Now up next we have an interview that I'm really excited about. It's an update from Toko from Representative Tim Popplewell. Now of course we've covered Toko a fair amount in the past, but they have some really exciting updates that were just announced at Token 2049, so let's check it out. Tim, welcome. Thanks for hopping on.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So, Tim, to get started here, considering we haven't had you on in the past, can you just tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Tim Popplewell. I'm the MD of a business called Toko, which is a real-world asset tokenization platform. I've been around the block for a long, long time, been in this space for about 4 or 5 years now. And we're just in the process of changing some things at Toko, which I'll come on to talk about. That's really an introduction of who I am.
All right, fair enough. So I guess we might as well go right into Toko. We've covered in the past, but we might have some new viewers today. So just tell us a little bit about Toko and where you stand now.
Yeah, so Toko was originally almost a pet name for this project from within a law firm called DLA Piper, who are one of the governing council members in the Hedera ecosystem. Toko's been around in various forms for 3 or 4 years and really started to take prominence maybe about 18 months ago when we set up in Dubai. And if you think about from our perspective, Dubai is really where the zeitgeist is for our industry and also has a real forward-thinking regulator in VARA. So it made sense for us to move there. We set up there and we were very lucky to get we were in the first batch of licenses given by VARA. And to some degree, that was the fact that DLA Piper had helped VARA write the regulations. So it made sense for them to trust us more than perhaps some others. And so we were lucky to get our licenses at that point. And yeah, so since then we've been quietly building, I would say, and not making a great deal of noise about what we're doing for various reasons. Which I'll probably come on to. And now we're really ready to start operating, and I'll come on to again a little bit later on as to why now.
Sounds good. Now, I was in an interview not long ago or interviewing somebody from Cask Capital, and it actually surprised me. I knew that they were building on Hedera, but I didn't know they had a relationship with Toko. That is with whiskey casks, a completely new type of asset class, or at least one that I hadn't thought of in the past. What are the different types of teams and the different types of real-world assets that you're into tokenizing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we like to think we are a mission-driven business, and insofar as we're mission-driven, that kind of focuses us on certain areas and probably moves us away from others. Because one of the things about real-world assets is, depending on who you talk to, there's trillions and trillions of assets that could be tokenized in any number of different asset classes. We want to focus on ones where we think we can make a difference, and so. To start with, not surprisingly, coming out of a law firm, there's a few legal tech type use cases. There's one in particular that we're going to launch probably in the next couple of months, which we think is extremely exciting. And that was assisted by a grant from the Hashgraph Association. So thank you to the guys over there for helping us get that one off the ground. So there's a few around legal tech, and I'll give you one example. It's really around opening up legal representation to those who aren't able to get it at the moment, and specifically around very, very large cases against governments or extremely large organizations where the cost of litigation is so exorbitantly high that the normal person just can't possibly afford it. So there are things around there. We are looking at a couple around the general process of, I would call it, provenance and supply chain provenance, because we think there's some really great efficiencies there. We're dabbling, I would say, a little bit with real estate, and then there's financial services, which is by far the biggest, by far the most obvious. And again, we're playing with certain people in that area to bring some things to market. Again, we should have one or possibly two products coming to market before the end of the year.
All right. Well, good insights all around. Now, I understand you are calling me from a hotel room because you're attending Token 2049 in Singapore. Why did Toko decide to have a presence at that event?
Yeah, I am. I'm a little bleary-eyed, so apologies. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here, which is 4 a.m. in Dubai, and we only arrived last night, so it's all a little bit. I'm on about my third cup of coffee this morning to get me going. Yeah, I mean it's one of the major Web3 events in the world. Everybody's here. There's a lot of the people who we're working with, a lot of our clients are here. So it makes sense from a point of view of just going around saying hi to everybody at the same time. But we're also announcing a couple of things here as well. And that's the real reason we're here. So we're announcing a complete rebrand because what we've realized is that Toko, as I said earlier, it's a bit of a pet name. It doesn't actually really mean anything, and it doesn't really reflect what we do as a business. So we're changing our name, and that will be announced tomorrow, which is quite exciting. And we're going to, I'll tell you what it is. We're going to be called Scintilla going forward. We put a couple of teasers out a couple of weeks ago, just start to get a bit of a buzz in the industry because we've been very, very quiet. Scintilla obviously is perhaps it's not obvious, but it's a Latin word, and it means a small spark, and that's really where we are. We're looking to play. We're looking to create those sparks and actually get things moving. It's the first conference we've been to for a long time, and with any real presence. And that's because we've been building. We didn't really see the need to spend time necessarily just talking about things. We were in the background actually building things. So it's been a bit of a journey, but this one, Hedera's got a great big presence here, as of many others. So we'll be on the Hedera stand tomorrow and the day after, which is quite exciting. Just announcing our name and announcing a little bit more about what we're doing and what we've been up to. The second piece of news is also in the very, very near future. And this kind of makes sense. DLA Piper is a great place to incubate a business like ours. Supremely wonderful company, supremely talented legal firm, highly trusted and respected and with good reason. And whilst you're incubating these types of projects, it makes sense to stay there. But once you get operational, it no longer really makes sense to DLA Piper. Because at the end of the day, they're a law firm. They're not a Web3 digital asset provider in a regulated space. So from our perspective, this is the time now, from both ours and DLA's perspective, this is the time for us to move away from one another. So there's being a management takeover, which hopefully will complete in the next few days, which obviously I am a big part of, which is very exciting. So DLA Piper will stay with us. They're not. I'm not letting them off the hook that easily, but they'll play a far smaller role. We'll still obviously have a very, very strong allegiance to them and work with them wherever we can. But it will very much be Scintilla on its own from now on as a regulated asset provider.
Well, I think what you're saying is really refreshing for the Hedera community to hear and reinforcing, because we've been talking about how a lot of times enterprises don't really talk about what they're working on until there's something to announce, where a startup may talk a lot more about it because they need to get that excitement for potential VC investment and things along those lines. So it's good to hear that that's exactly what you did. You waited, you built what needed to be built, and now that there's something to actually announce, now you're moving forward with that. So that's very good to hear. The last thing that I just want to ask, we just want to look into the future a little bit. What does the future hold for DLA Piper, Toko, and these relationships with Hedera?
DLA Piper's probably not my area of expertise, to be perfectly honest. I'm not a lawyer, so...
and I should have said Toko, right? I should have said the new name.
Yeah. So DLA Piper is they're a massive global law firm. They're extremely successful, and I'm perfectly sure they'll continue to be. They are developing a really fantastic innovation hub, and I'm not just saying this to say it, but there are some extremely talented people in that space within DLA Piper, and there are some other really interesting ideas coming out of there in the kind of technology and innovation space. They're obviously a founding member of the Hedera Governing Council, obviously very close to it. And so my sense is that will continue. I don't see any particular change there. In terms of Scintilla, we're well funded, so we're not necessarily looking for finance at this point in time. We will obviously continue to work with Hedera. There's a couple of things we may even be talking to them about whilst we're here in Singapore, and we'll continue to work with them. So there's no real change there. And then in terms of Scintilla on its own, we're constantly looking for people with really exciting use cases where we think our expertise and their use case can gel together and create something really wonderful. And I'm excited because I can see them all the time. It's I don't know how many use cases come across my desk each month, but it's a significant number. And again, that's one of the reasons to being here is there are so many incredible people in our space and doing some incredible things. I'd like to think, because I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool Web3 person, that I have a decent skill in terms of determining what will work and what won't in reality, and that's hopefully where we're going to play going forward. Is picking some interesting projects and turning them into something really fantastic.
Well, Tim, again, I have to thank you for giving us some time today. Rob, over and over again, has said what a great asset you are to the Hedera ecosystem, and he's a pretty good judge of character. So thanks for coming on today and telling us about Scintilla.
No worries. Anytime.
So I think this is the first instance of a use case being built within one of these Hedera Governing Council members and spinning off into its own company. So it's great to see that kind of initial investment and incubation, and then those businesses being so viable that they can spin off and do that work on their own. So sticking with investment, we've been talking about investment a fair amount so far in the show. We're going to go back to the Qatar and Saudi investment. So as we discussed a few months ago, Qatar and Saudi Arabia did $50 and $250 million deals with THA to invest in the Hedera space. Now Qatar is putting some details behind it, and in the next 12 months, Qatar, the Hashgraph Association, and various other stakeholders will explore implementing 5 innovative use cases, including equity, Islamic bonds, and real estate tokenization, carbon credits, and sustainability, as well as consumer engagement and consumer loyalty programs. Now, real quick, before we get into Shark Bites, I do want to say that the Hedera Hackathon winners were announced just yesterday. I'm just going to go over the main overall winners here, but I'm sure we're going to get into some of the other winners in the weeks to come. But again, getting back to those overall winners, first place was Team Savira. Savira is a blockchain wallet and platform that empowers underserved communities through savings. Second place is one that we've covered a fair amount, and that is Team Nomad. Nomad is a peer-to-peer payment solution leveraging the Hedera network to provide instant, low-cost, and secure transactions without intermediaries. And in third place, and I hope I'm saying this right, is Team Crador. Crador's primary purpose is to revolutionize trade documentation through secure, compliant, and efficient digital solutions with a focus on MLETR-compliant EBLs and real-world asset tokenization. So congratulations to all the Hedera Hackathon winners, and if any of your teams want to come on the show and get highlighted, just go ahead and contact me. And without further delay, let's get into Shark Bites. Rob, welcome back. How's the Hedera life treating you?
Hey, Brandon. What a great week. I mean, the last 2 weeks have been just epic, so I'm really looking forward to these subjects today. And let's get into it.
There's a lot of groundwork that's being laid. There's no question about that. Now, we've had, as you mentioned, a few big announcements and stories coming out, and we've gotten several questions around all of them. Now, the first one we have is the Linux and Hiero announcement. Lewis asks, what's Rob's full take on the code donation to the Linux Foundation? How does this affect the Governing Council's management of the Hedera ecosystem? Naza asks if this affects our competitive advantage. Fistbump had a few, including including if any use cases were waiting on this open source development and what the impact on Swirls and Hashgraph and their funding would be. Tom Bega had concerns around the permanent seats on Hiero, and there were several others. And Rob, I know I threw an awful lot at you there, but just in general, what are your thoughts on this development and Hedera putting structure around the open source initiative?
Yeah, so by the time people watch this, I'm assuming they'll have seen, or they can refer to Richard Ben's interview with Brandon D, which I think happened yesterday. So I'll defer to Richard for the technical detail, because he's a far bigger brain than I am in these things. But from a governing council perspective, it's really, really important. This is the culmination, really, of 5 years of promises to create open source technology and for the Hedera stack to be fully open sourced. Now, of course, we started in that kind of patented, licensed way. And then we went through open review to open source. But the open source that we've had for the last 2 years, while being truly open source, had controls around the commits to the repositories and a very restricted number of maintainers. The Linux Foundation has been, as all Web2 developers know, has been around for decades now, really driving the open source principles of software development. And we'd already contributed in the early days to the Hyperledger project within the Linux Foundation, which was kind of the first steps toward this. But this isn't an out of the blue announcement. Actually, the Governing Council have been working on the full open sourcing of the Hedera code stack for some time now. I mean, it's obviously been roadmapped. It's been signaled for some time. We've always said that we're going to go full open source, so that shouldn't be a surprise. The questions were really on how we would do that, and there's been a task force. The Governing Council and the Hedera LLC has been running over the last number of months. We've had dedicated resources within the LLC focused on working through what it means to be open source. And of course, Hashgraph, or formerly known as Swirls Labs, have been the maintainers and been the custodians of that technology. But when we decentralized, when Swirls Labs got spun out of Hedera and that separation happened, and the LLC purchased the code off of Hedera in order to make it open source, that was the kind of starting gun for what has actually now culminated in this announcement. So the Hiero project, and it was described to me as Hiero as in hieroglyph. It does mean sacred, and it's got an H. So it's a really good name for it. It couldn't be Hedera, it couldn't be Hashgraph. It had to be another name under the new decentralized trust project within the Linux Foundation. And that's quite a key thing as well. The Linux Foundation wanted to pull together, the Web3 aspects of the open source. And it had, a few projects scattered around. And to bring these all together under this new top-level project called Decentralized Trust was, a big deal. And that was the announcement this week in Vienna. But as a founding member, Hedera contributed all of this code stack that is currently maintained by Hashgraph into the new Hiero project. So think of this as donating all the code to be fully open source and managed under all the processes and all the separate governance of the Linux Foundation. And you can read what that means. And Hedera being an instantiation of that code base, that open source code base. So we kind of separated out what the Hedera stack looks like with everything that we know, about Hedera, and everything, kind of nothing changes. So the Hedera network, the code it's based on, the token economy within it is all the same, and it remains, and the code and the roadmap as it goes forward is the same. By putting the code and open sourcing the code into the Hiero project under the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust, they have kind of created a fertile environment within which developers can more easily develop on top of that code base. So that the ultimate goal of that really is to get a lot more energy in the developer ecosystem to allow more contributions. Now, remember, Web3 developers are probably, I don't know what the numbers are, someone told me it's like 50,000 total across all of layer ones and layer twos, everyone working in the Web3 space. Now compare that to Web2 developers that have been, it's orders of magnitude greater, many, many, many millions. And those are far more familiar with open source via Linux Foundation and the ways that we kind of traditionally have coded. And remember, Hedera has these APIs which are very familiar to traditional coders. So drawing in this entirely new developer pool that are very familiar with open source and Linux Foundation, and being the only layer one founding member of Decentralized Trust is a massive, massive deal. And it's, testament, I think, to the vision of Lehman and the technical committee of the governing council that this has kind of culminated at this point in time. Purely coincidental that it was the 5th anniversary of open access, which is pretty amazing. That and Lehman's keynote at Vienna and the engagement that we've had since then is an amazing signal to me that it was the right thing to do at the right time. And I guess we will see whether it draws in the amount of development that we expect. Now, is it a threat? I don't believe it is a threat because we were already open source. So, actually, there was nothing stopping other projects taking the code base and kind of spinning off, new kind of Hedera-like or Hedera Lite, maybe, networks. It was decided, a couple of years ago that we had got sufficient adoption, sufficient distribution of the tokens. With the maturity of the network was such that the threats weren't actually so great anymore. And same applies. Actually, the whole Web3 space now is a lot more collegiate. It's becoming less tribal, although it's hard to say that in some on some days. But there is a general recognition that the rising tide lifts all boats, and that interoperability is key. Liquidity has to flow across networks, and actually they're just the rails. And so value will be attracted to the networks on which are best suited to those projects. And as we know, Hedera has probably some of the best credentials in the whole Web3 space technically. And so, there's nothing wrong. I don't think we should be worried about technical threats or other projects adopting the technology, because open source is all about collaboration. It's about contribution, and our roadmap is our roadmap. But that doesn't mean that the tooling and the suggestions and the improvement proposals that are contributed via Linux shouldn't and couldn't be adopted into Hedera as well. So I hope that makes things a little clearer.
It absolutely does, and we already got the explanation from Lehman as well. But not only are we joining different organizations and consortia and participating in tearing down these walls of tribalism, as you say, as we all say, but we're leading in a lot of ways as well. We joined MiCa, but we're leading here with this open source initiative, and we are, of course, are leading with DeRec as well. So all of that is really good to see. One thing that I would like to follow up on is, and Lewis was alluding to this, what responsibilities are going to go to Hiero and what responsibilities are going to remain with the governing council? Because, of course, we do expect them to still govern certain parts of the network.
So Hiero doesn't govern the Hedera network. Hiero has no responsibilities to do at all, actually, with Hedera. I mean, that separation is absolute. I mean, we do have standing members of the committees within Hiero for this particular code base. So the Hiero maintainer team and the committees influenced, and there are members like Lehman who participate in those. So there is a kind of directional influence from Hedera into the projects, just to kind of oversee the code base as we go forward. there's no real backflow that isn't controlled. So, the Hiero project as an open source project, it could go crazy, things could happen in there, and contributions that are nothing to do with Hedera and would never kind of be incorporated into the Hedera stack,
but could be.
But potentially could be, right? So, the innovation that happens under open source will give us a smorgasbord of other things that we could potentially incorporate. So I'm not sure whether the HIP process will continue in the Hiero space. I mean, it'll certainly continue in the Hedera space. So think of it as a kind of a one-way valve, right? The valve will control the flow from Hiero into Hedera, and that valve will be, the TechCom processes as they currently manage the code base will ensure that nothing too crazy gets in, but actually all the innovative and creative wider community contributions to within Hiero will be considered for inclusion in the future.
All right, that's a lot clearer to me now. We're going to move on to the next topic, and this one actually came out last week, and it has to do with the Australian Digital Dollar Project. When I heard that, I knew that we were certainly going to get the inside track with you, Rob. So can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so and I've kind of influenced this a little bit, maybe. So we have many projects, many use cases that use stablecoins, and I've been piloting and running proofs of concept using the Stablecoin Studio since it was launched, a year ago. But the one missing thing that we've had is the on-ramp, the on-ramps and off-ramps. And here in Australia, we don't have very clear regulation around stablecoins yet. There's a lot of allusions to the kinds of licensing regime that will be employed, but we're expecting that to happen next year. So our Treasury, our version of SEC, ASIC, and our prudential regulator are working on regulation which will make stablecoin issuance and the organizations and the regime around stablecoins and other forms of digital currency a lot clearer next year. So with 9 months or so in advance, it's very important to start planning ahead for production systems where we have clarity around use of stablecoins. Now, like I've always said, if we have use cases that operate stablecoins on Hedera, you've effectively got a micropayment system, right? Because those stablecoins will operate at the speed of Hedera. So all of the really fun micropayments, proofs of concept that I've been running for years, all of a sudden could become a reality overnight. And I need an on-ramp and an off-ramp. Now, we have a number of stablecoin issuers in Australia for Australian dollars, but AUDC, Pty Limited, that's the name of the company, issue one called AUDD. And they are a spin-out business from a very well-established, very high-profile payments company called Novati. So this is entirely legit. As one of the questions on X pointed at me. It's a legit business. They've been running for some time. It's still a startup, so it's a small business within the Novati group. And they've already issued AUDD on Ethereum and Stellar rather, and I think Solana's coming. So there's an established process. So plugging in the Stablecoin Studio is actually not a big deal. In fact, I'm told it's only a few weeks of work, which is a great kind of credential for other stablecoin issuers everywhere if they want to kind of adopt the Stablecoin Studio. So we'll see how long it truly takes. But actually, once you've got all the processes, the UI, the customer base, and the banking relationships, for escrow and everything, because these are fully fiat-backed stablecoins, and they're self-custody. So I put $100 in to acquire $100 worth of AUDD, and then I receive them into my wallet. So any HTS-based wallet will be able to receive them. So that's really important as an on-ramp and an off-ramp for many of the other things that we'd like to do. Plus, of course, it's a great credential for Australia to have these multi-chain issuers doing really innovative things. And the AUDD team have been really kind of trailblazing in Australia for this for a couple of years now. So I'm super excited to be working with them. Full credit and kudos to Sabrina and the foundation for enabling it too, with a little bit of grant funding. And watch this space. There's plenty more down the track. So this isn't just about being able to trade or hold them on exchanges. It's actually true utility. Looking forward to talking more about that in due course.
So, Rob, you said you put $100 in and you can get it put into your wallet. Does that mean this is a retail-facing application that anybody can do this, or is this just for businesses? So it is for retail.
Yeah. It's
okay.
Yeah, so anyone can sign up with AUDD and on their website and go through the KYC processes, as usual. They have a license, their banking license, Novati, or an AFSL. It's a kind of financial services license here in Australia. So, they do operate under a regulated regime already. And so, they have to go through the KYC process. But yeah, anyone can go on. By all means, go on now and buy some AUDD if you want. But it won't be on Hedera for a little while. But when it is, we'll be announcing a lot more.
All right, good to hear. Now, you mentioned the stablecoin studio. The next thing we're going to talk about is an announcement that came out this week from the asset tokenization studio. And we did get a question around this from No Man's Internet, who asks, what happened to the stablecoin studio, and will the same thing happen to the asset tokenization studio? So, Rob, just to start off, you can give your thoughts on the announcement around the asset tokenization studio, and then maybe you can touch on the question from No Man's Internet.
Yeah, this is another huge deal. I mean, I'm kind of Captain Cliche this week, but 1 year on from the stablecoin studio being announced at Token 2049 last year, this week last year, we now have another one, so the asset tokenization studio. I haven't had a chance to have a play with it yet, and I hope to later today. But I pointed a few people who I trust at it, whether they be crypto lawyers or hedge fund managers who are looking at asset tokenization and other people who are kind of versed in the real world asset tokenization space, and they're blown away. All of this tooling, manna from heaven from people who actually think about how one does real world asset tokenization. And it's really... It's a real zeitgeist at the moment. The real-world asset tokenization is one of the big themes that we're hearing a lot about. So to be able to launch this is fantastic, And I'm hearing a lot out of Token 2049 in Singapore that it's resonating and it's getting lots and lots of really good feedback. The stablecoin studio, I think it's fair to say, is a lower order studio. I mean, it was the first one that came out of that accelerator fold from Swells Labs or Hashgraph. The same developers, IO builders, have worked on both. So I guess there are a lot of learnings coming out of stablecoin studio into the asset tokenization studio. IO builders have a huge amount of expertise and knowledge in financial markets infrastructure and building fintech systems. So they're a great partner for Hashgraph to be working on this with. And I guess, we had a little bit of marketing around Stablecoin Studio last year, but we didn't have a great push, and it was quite early. Like I said, I've used it for a number of things actually, and it incorporates really well into other products, but it's still stablecoin. Stablecoins are capability, they're primitives that can be used within solutions. So they don't resonate as much as maybe real-world asset tokenization platforms. And, from what I've read, you've got all these templates, different types of assets that are, can be very easily adopted into your solution using the studio. So I'm not aware of how many projects have adopted Stablecoin Studio in the last year. I've certainly, like I said, found it very easy to incorporate them into a number of proofs of concept. Stablecoins will become the TradFi, DeFi crossover point. And they are already, right? But people think of stablecoins as just being the fallback in a centralized exchange. So you don't have to come all the way back out to fiat in your bank account. You can hold it in. That's really the only use case of stablecoins thus far. I see them in an entirely different way. I see stablecoins as being digital currencies that can be programmed and can be utilized within applications, whether it be DeFi or more traditional applications for things like micropayments or cross-border remittances or whatever. So I think that adoption curve is still kind of climbing. How amazing to have. And don't forget, we've got the Guardian as well. So we've now got, Guardian is effectively the kind of the Uber studio. It was the first big open source project coming out of Swells Labs and Hashgraph with the foundation support. So obviously Wes Geisenberg are really driving that. But, now we've got all of this technology for building sustainability economies around Guardian. We've got Stablecoin Studio providing these primitives, and we've got the Asset Tokenization Studio for real-world asset tokens. This capability layer on top of the base layer is kind of forming all the time. We had this question earlier about Hiero. All of these products are open source capability that will, I suspect, get transferred in as well. So that will drive a lot of creativity in the wider developer community. And so it's not just the base layer that's going to be innovated on and benefit from the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust project, but also all of these capabilities as well. And all these building blocks start kind of coming together. Working on solutions which incorporate Guardian and stablecoins and potentially, ways of funding projects through tokenized funds, for example. So, there's so much can be done with these building blocks that are now forming, and it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, again, laying all that groundwork. It's really good to see. Now, the next one comes from Captain Brando, who says, Brandon, in your interview with AJ from AJ Writes Crypto, AJ made a good point about activating your community after a big Hedera announcement. Hedera has historically not been real great at this. I'm curious what you and Rob would suggest that could activate HBAR to exponentially increase Hedera's reach when they drop big news. So, Rob, the first thing that I want to say is, and we've been talking about this in a little bit different context, is I do think we need to regain the trust of a big part of the community. Once that's done, I think this will be a lot easier to do. But once that's been done, there's a lot of things that we can do. And I think we saw some of it around Karate Combat 49 that just took place. We had the actual official accounts participating, as far as Hedera participating in some of the social media stuff. That goes for the leaders as well. We should be using, all of the leaders in this space should be making a real attempt each week to try to use these different applications, carve out a little bit of time. And Rob, you're a great example of this, because once you start to use it, you realize how cool some of these things that are built are, and you can engage with the community. And once you have those touch points with the community, you understand where their pain points are and so forth. The other thing that I would like to say is, when the announcements drop, and Hedera has been doing better on some of these fronts, have as much content for your megaphone, which is your community, have as much content as possible ready for that, whether that's in print, whether that's infographics, whether that's videos and interviews. Have as much of that ready as possible, so all of those influencers and your community can use that megaphone and get the word out there, and do it in a way that they are conveying the correct information. That's one thing as a content creator I'm always looking for, is ways that I can kind of enhance what I'm talking about. And that really comes down to content, whether it's quotes, whether it's all of the other things that I just mentioned. So those are the first few things that I would do, starting with the trust, making sure all the leaders in our ecosystem are engaged by using the applications first, and then engaging with the community once they've used them, and then create all that content as much as possible. So when you have these big announcements, you can drop it all at once. But, Lehman did that around Linux, right? We had him talking on stage ready to explain exactly what was going on. And then you go on pretty much a media tour when these things come out. But Rob, I know this is a little bit out of your wheelhouse, but what are your thoughts?
The thing that really resonated with me about that interview with AJ was when he said, for every dollar you spend on building, spend another dollar on talking about it, right? Don't be cheap. Sometimes we just feels we're too cheap on the marketing side. I know that's may not go down well in certain areas, but we have got so many wonderful things to talk about, and all the time, every week we talk about all these new developments and announcements. But it's such a consumptive society now, social medias. Today's big announcement will be forgotten tomorrow. We need to reuse all of those snippets. All that content can be repurposed, and the echoes should be loud and build, and not just lost in the wind. We need a machine that can do that, right? We've got the tools to automate it. We've got socials. We've got some of the best Web3 community anywhere on the planet in the HBARbarians. Use them. Get everyone out with their loudspeakers. The mouth, with its loudspeaker. These tools are fantastic, right? But sometimes it just feels that we're doing it in a piecemeal fashion. We make a big announcement and then it's forgotten about, right? So where are the echoes? Where are the ripples? Where are the resonance that actually builds over time? So, like you say, that's not in my lane, and I'm speaking as a marketing layperson. I am a consumer, and it does frustrate me knowing that there's so much happening, and it's very easy for the negative sentiment to creep in. We need, I feel like we've turned a corner after the last 2-3 weeks. I feel like that there is a growth building across the ecosystem where we're really striking, hitting our stride rather. And, with some more big announcements coming up, and, the macro environment looking increasingly bullish. I think, we're exactly at the right place at the right time, but we need to keep on talking about it and celebrating these announcements, not, sniping. And a marketing machine would do that, a marketing machine dedicated at the retail end of the spectrum. We've got the enterprise stuff covered, I think, but really being able to shout from the rooftops about and celebrate all of the amazing things that we're truly leading in. You talked about DeRec, we just talked about the Linux Foundation. We've got some of the best tools, the best user experience out there. Karate Combat is, over 1 million people watching it. I mean, how incredible! With Hedera right at the heart, literally at the heart of the ring. And we're not really using it to the best of its ability. So we could do better, but we're doing okay. But we could do better.
One of the things is you can use those things we talked about as a litmus test. If you're not willing to spend that extra money for a grant that you're making, or you're not willing to use the application yourself, it probably shouldn't get funded in the first place. And then you can focus and hone in on those things by using that litmus test on the things that are really going to move the needle. I mean, nobody's going to question what we've done with Karate Combat. And unlike a lot of the other networks out there, they are actually using Hedera for many different aspects of what they're building, whether it's the governance, whether it's the up-only gaming, and so forth. And that's just going to expand over time. So I'm excited about what we're seeing. Go ahead.
But there are other things as well, right?
So, yeah, of course.
We've got all the fun, which really, engages community and gets people talking about it and crosses over layer ones, so we're kind of building that, the trust layer, in terms of people and socials. But Neuron is just the most amazing project. I would love to see the Hedera ecosystem engaging with James and what Neuron are doing. And I know we're just starting on that, but I just picked that one out of the air. There are so many. We talk about Zenny, we talk about all of the fantastic tooling that we have now, and what the whole community is doing. So there's so much to talk about and so much to celebrate. It's something I think we could do better at.
Understood. And finally, Rob, what are your thoughts on Brady's article on the need for clear vision and metrics for Hedera? Now, I covered this last week, and then I talked to Brady earlier this week, and we're going to be showing that in this show in a little while. But I think you engaged with Brady around that a little bit. Yeah. So I wanted your thoughts.
Yeah, I did, and previous to that as well. So Brady and I have talked for quite some time when he was previously at Swells Labs, and and since he's left with Bonzo. So I think he's right. I honestly think he's right. I think the metrics that we hang on to have have a place, but they're not truly reflective of the health or otherwise of the Hedera ecosystem. And it's very easy to hide behind metrics, lies, damned lies, and statistics, right? You can make whatever you like of data. So I am going to personally take this on. And as co-chair of CorpCom, I'm going to discuss with the governing council how we can get better metrics to truly represent the Hedera network. And in advance of that, I'm going to do community outreach. So what we'll do is have spaces or whatever and get feedback. And I'll talk to Brady again, and I'll talk to many other community members to see what metrics they would like to see. And then take it from there. But yes, we've got a governing council meeting in November where I will present and I'll get the CorpCom leadership behind me on this. It's actually it's not one of our objectives this year, but it falls well into the CorpCom lane. And so, I want to thank Brady for raising it. It's something which people have been talking about for some time. And you'll remember Scott Teal talking about total value represented 18 months ago as a different metric, or one that's more truly represents the kind of real world asset tokenization, exactly what we're talking about now. As these capabilities grow on top of the network, I think we can actually get better at reflecting them in metrics that are more meaningful than just TPS and active accounts and total value locked. So those primitive metrics, would remain, but I think we can get a lot better about other ones which are more meaningful now that we've got a flourishing, DeFi ecosystem and a flourishing utility ecosystem, and everything else. I think we can do better. So watch this space. I'll take it away, and then you and I will probably touch base with Brady and get something sorted out in terms of spaces.
Well, Rob, for getting some of that feedback, can I suggest the Mouth? They have some good tools that you can use to get some of that feedback. Rob, as always, Absolutely. Thank you so much for hopping on and giving us some time today, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Brendan. Take care.
So there at the end, we were talking about Brady, his metrics, and how it could influence the vision for Hedera in the future. He had some really good thoughts there, and I wanted to get it from the horse's mouth. So I invited Brady on, not just to talk about his metrics and that article that he posted, but also to get into Bonzo Finance and how he's pioneering crypto lending in the Hedera ecosystem. Brady, to start off, welcome back.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Well, Brady, I want to get into some of your thought leadership, and you've done a great job in some of that in the ecosystem in a few different ways, including retail pays the bills, but you have a new article out that I think is really important as well. But before we get into that, I want to talk about your business. Bonzo Finance, you are the founder of Bonzo Finance, and it is going to be one of the first lending platforms in the Hedera space. So can you give us some updates? I know you're getting close to launching. Can you just tell us about some of your initiatives and other things that the community might need to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, CEO and co-founder of Bonzo Finance Labs. We're contributing to Bonzo Finance. It is one of the first lending protocols that is coming to the Hedera ecosystem, and it's based on Aave, which is the most utilized lending protocol across the Web3 space today. The latest initiative that we have is a pre-season points program. So if you've been following the project, we are running a points season. It's 3 seasons in total. Each season lasts 6 months, and users who are lending to the protocol and borrowing from the protocol earn points based on the values and the time that they're doing so. And this is to ultimately reward participants who are utilizing the protocol. At the end of each season, the points are used to inform an airdrop of Bonzo tokens, and helping to ensure decentralization of the project and widespread adoption. And so for this pre-season points program, what we're doing is a token-weighted airdrop of points designed to reward holders who are holding assets that are supported by the protocol on day one. And the way this works is we did a snapshot for token holdings on September 13th at 4 p.m. We're going to be starting the first distribution of Bonzo points today at 4 p.m., so September 16th, and that starts with HBAR X. and then continuing to do airdrops of points over the next couple weeks for each of the assets that are supported by Bonzo Finance, like PAC tokens, SOS, USDC, etc. The points are allocated based on the amount of each asset that you're holding, and so there's a unique regression curve for each asset just to make sure there's a fair distribution of points. And if you're holding an NFT multiplier, that amplifies your points earning. So a Bonzo NFT collectible, depending on the tier that you have, it's 1.1 times points, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.5. There's also a leaderboard, which is really cool. We're going to try and make this very competitive, and props to the HBAR community as well. I think they've done a great job of educating the ecosystem about points programs, their work. And so we'll be doing a leaderboard as well and doing updates for that over the next 2 weeks. And we're really excited about this program.
So is there anything besides holding the tokens in your wallet? Is there anything special that people need to do? Do they need to associate anything to make sure that they maximize these points?
Yeah, great question. So that's part of the beauty of using the HCS 20 standard for points. So points are actually inscriptions on the Hedera network. And with that standard, there's no need for any users to associate tokens or sign up somewhere. We can just deliver points right to their account, which is really great.
So if I had, karate tokens in my Karate Combat app, will that count?
That will count. And we're pretty excited about something we're doing with the Karate Combat app here in particular. When you look at the Karate Combat app, there's 400,000 plus users that have signed up, 400,000 accounts in the Karate Combat app, people who are holding karate tokens. But today, they're sort of locked into the Karate Combat app in that they aren't connecting Karate Combat to the DeFi ecosystem. And we want to try and create a distribution model in a sense where all of these karate holders are actually able to come into Hedera DeFi and start participating. And so we're going to be providing instructions on how to safely and at everyone's own risk import their Karate Combat wallet into Hashpack, and then go to Bonzo and be able to check the points that they've earned based on the karate holdings that they have in the wallet, introduce them to Hedera DeFi, and get them set up with the rest of the ecosystem.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping I was going to hear. Now I'd like to move on to some of the thought leadership that you've had in this space. So we're going to talk about that article. Why did you decide to take such a deep dive into the important metrics to pay attention to for the Hedera network?
It's a good question. I think having clearly defined and meaningful success metrics that are comparable to the rest of the market that the Hedera network competes in is really important. And today the kinds of metrics that we're seeing, I think, from Hedera are mostly focused around maybe total transaction counts. So we'll see, every 10 billion transactions, an update from the social handle for Hedera. We've hit the next 10 billion. And I think at the surface, that feels really nice and it gets people jazzed. But ultimately, I don't know if that actually meaningfully describes the network health, adoption, and competitive standing of the network. And we really have to sort of understand from the perspective of a scoreboard how Hedera is doing relative to the rest of the market that Hedera is competing in. And by focusing on metrics that matter and are comparable and help with strategic decision making, Hedera is better able to communicate its vision, align all the various organizations that are supporting the network's success, as well as all of the community members that are building on the network as well.
So the next question I have, of course, we've talked a little bit about some of the metrics that are being used currently. We have TPS. I know we focus on that an awful lot. So how do you think we should change about how we're looking at that? And what metrics do you think are important?
Yeah, so, there was a great discussion that I had with Rob, who I believe sits on the governing council, and this was on Reddit. We went back and forth a bit and trying to understand sort of objectively what it is that Hedera is focused on, and kind of what it drilled down into is revenue, which I think is great. That's a very important metric, and that's something that it sounds like they believe is important as well. I think the lens in which revenue is being viewed is very narrow. It's a low aperture. It's related to, the transaction counts of the Hedera consensus service and the Hedera token service. But with Web3, there is such a wide aperture of things that contribute to a network's overall revenue. And a lot of that, a lot of those things are related to sort of the network effects that we're seeing in Web3 and the need to look at metrics that are maybe one level below total revenue and things like market cap. And so some of those things are, total value locked in the DeFi ecosystem, or decentralized exchange trading volume, stablecoin liquidity, the market capitalization of RWAs. And I think the reason why it's important to focus on these metrics that are maybe, again, just one layer below is because what it ends up doing is forcing critical thinking and strategic decision making that improves these metrics, which ultimately end up relating back up to the network revenue.
That makes perfect sense. I'm going to go over the different metrics that you picked out. It was network revenue, TVL, DEX trading volume, stablecoin liquidity. So we're talking about USDC, how much we actually have minted on the network, real world asset market cap. So we're talking about things like BlackRock and Aberdeen tokenizing their funds on Hedera. We have a lot of different ones that are being done at this point. NFT trading volume and market cap. And then finally, native staking and liquid staking rates. So first of all, I'd like to back up. There is one that I really like, one metric that I do think that we need to focus on, and it aligns with the Hedera token holder, but more importantly, it aligns with the amount of capital that's available to the entire Hedera ecosystem. Market cap of HBAR, I think, is the best proxy to show how much capital is available for all of the different projects in our ecosystem, because of course we are building it on the back of HBAR. But I love the fact that you're focusing on the total network revenue. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it should be unsubsidized revenue, which is another thing that we've talked a fair amount about. But I think those overarching themes make sense. But to a point that you made before we started to actually record here, I think all of the metrics that you have should be discussed at those governing council meetings. So why don't we dive into that a little bit, and how do we shift that focus so it's actually making its way into impacting the network?
Yeah, no, fully agreed. I think the metrics that you choose, they ultimately end up becoming actionable. It's if you're forced to look at these metrics and also compare the metrics to your competitors, you end up having to think critically and strategically about decision making that ultimately improves them. And so it creates a sense of, I think, accountability and better thinking about what's going to improve the adoption of the network.
So if we just want to give an example of that real quick, if the governing council every time is looking at how much USDC, how much Swiss franc stablecoin there is on Hedera, and they're looking at that in comparison to all of our competitors, they're probably going to think of more ways that we can bump that metric up. If they're having those discussions on a regular basis, not necessarily just the things that they're working on, but the things that are important to the rest of the network, to make sure that we're keeping up with our competitors on a lot of these metrics that they focus on a regular basis, right?
That's right, yeah. And a significant number of these metrics too, they're driven by other services on the network beyond HTS and HCS. So if you look at the cost of utilizing smart contracts, it's potentially 10,000 times more expensive than using the Hedera consensus service. And so there's a huge impact on revenue when you start to dive into applications and tools that are utilizing other services on the network that I think are really important. And ultimately, if you're improving some of these metrics, and again, Hedera should really lead the discussion on that. I've listed some that I think, in my own opinion, might be important, but Hedera, the organization itself, needs to put a stake in the ground around what they see as important, and then continue to beat the drum towards improving those metrics.
I think that makes all the sense in the world. Brady, the other thing that I wanted to pretty much thank you for is that this being a decentralized network, I think sometimes people step back and they say, well, Hedera has this, or Hashgraph has this, the HBAR Foundation has this. We're a decentralized organization, right? This is all of the different players. And I think we all need to stand up and tell what our point of view is, get that out there, make sure that they understand our point of view, because if not, they may go off in different directions. They have to have all this information. And I think you're leading the charge with things like this article that you just put out.
Really appreciate that. It's important to have alignment. You can have decentralization and all still be aligned. And I think that's critically important. There's a number of different organizations, as you said, that are supporting the growth and adoption of the network. But ultimately, they should at least have a core focus that's aligned to some overarching vision and some quantifiable measure of success.
Very well said. Brady, before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to cover?
Nothing else at this time. No, really excited about everything that's happening in the space. It does feel like there's a significant amount of movement and change just across the entire ecosystem right now. And, excited to be helping contribute to that change with our team and bringing lending online. Yeah, just looking forward to the next 6 to 12 months.
But Brady, I just want to say that, I really appreciate all the work you've put in after you've left Hashgraph, identifying the one space where we needed to fill a gap, and that was lending. And it seems like you're coming out with a really great product. Again, thanks for coming on, and I hope we see you back soon.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
So you can't talk about Hedera this week without talking about how much of a success Karate Combat 49 at Token 2049 in Singapore was. So following Brandon D's suggestion, we saw a lot more engagement from the official accounts around Hedera, particularly the official Hedera account itself. We also saw a lot of crypto and broader influencers like Mario Newfall engaging around Karate Combat. The community was also happy with the commercial that aired around Hedera during the live stream of Karate Combat 49. So let's take a look at that.
Up-only gaming is different. When a fight comes up, if you have karate tokens, you place them on a fighter. If he wins, you get additional tokens. If he loses, you don't lose anything. Web3 has allowed us to engage the fans and do things that we couldn't do with traditional tools. We're looking for 10, 20 million fans. Traditional blockchains don't support that kind of volume. We're enjoying the journey. We're really excited about the community's response within Web3 and traditional sports.
So Karate Combat is still seeing solid usage around the up-only gaming. They had about 100,000 active participants in this last event. But I think since there was a lot of attention around this event, we're going to see what we've seen in the past, and we'll probably see an uptick in the next event, Karate Combat 50, coming up in October. And with that, let's dive into some network analysis. Hedera transaction volume was cruising along at about 2,500 transactions per second before falling off yesterday. It came back with a vengeance, though it has been volatile. We did process over 1 billion transactions this past week and had an impressive max TPS over 10,000. Time to consensus finality is still down at 2.9 seconds, and we created over 30,000 accounts this past week. An interesting fact on the revenue front is that there was actually a surplus going into account 800. Granted, this is due to a combination of low staking rewards and subsidized revenue, but it was still good to see it turn green. This data was provided by Hashpoint Research, which we'll have more on next week. Of course, we expect revenue to increase significantly, and I'm making it a bit of my own mission to ensure that that 10% currently allocated to account 800 is protected for token holders. Moving down to fungible tokens, Wrapped HBAR took the top spot, followed by Karate, Dovu, and Siki. Next up is Sauce, Native USDC, and the meme coin Zero. To round out the top 10, we have Energy Trade Token, Earthlings Steam, and Hashpacks Pack Token. Moving down to our NFTs, the Malaysian Student Credential again took the top spot, followed by the Saucer Swaps Liquidity Provider Token, the War Operations and Location Token, the Earthlings Apparatus NFT, the Road Code 2024 Access Card, Doctor Who Worlds Apart, the Not a Slime World NFT, Silk Swap, and H-Suite LP tokens, and finally Hedera Monkeys. And with that, let's jump into some DeFi. The total value locked in the Hedera ecosystem is about $48 million. $44 million of that is on Saucer Swap. H-Suite took some market share and is up to $2.54 million, and HelloSwap is at $1.42 million. Moving over to the HBAR and crypto markets, risk assets, including crypto, got a bump this week when the Fed cut interest rates by 0.5 point instead of the normal quarter-point move. This could indicate a loosening cycle that just so happens to coincide with the 4-year crypto cycle. Now, the Fed is loosening for a reason, and we may see some bad economic data this fall and a deflationary impulse, but we're setting up pretty nicely for 2025. Bitcoin is down 1.7% on the day, but up 5% on the week to $62,600. Unfortunately, even with the midweek bump that allowed HBAR to recover some losses, HBAR is still down slightly on the week to between 5.1 and 5.2 cents, an area that could set up as support if it holds, but it's too early to tell at this point. As we close out this very busy week, we have a lot to look forward to next week as well. I'm going to have James on from Neuron to give us the inside track on exactly what they're working on. We're going to get Hashpoint Research on to talk about their entire new suite of research tools for the Hedera ecosystem. Of course, we're going to have Rob back for Shark Bite, so drop your questions down below. That's all we have. We'll see you next week.